Cool. How's everybody doing? We're live now. Cool. Can you hear me properly, right? I assume.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. We're now live. Thank you to everybody watching. Welcome to another session of Fak'ugesi Festival. I'm the curator, Dylan Aspiri, and this year's theme is Build Because You Have to. And I think this is an interesting panel because it's around education in the animation industry. And I think this is an important space and there's an important discussion around, so what does education look like right now and what are the challenges and how do you build basically for a better pipeline for the animation industry? Today we're joined by 5 panelists, all coming from different spaces, formal, informal education spaces around animation. And this panel discussion is in partnership with Culture and Film Commission. And let's get into it. I'll allow them to introduce themselves. Guess who wants to start?
I can start if you want.
Okay.
So, hi everyone, my name is Jeannie Vati. I work for Wits Simlofong Digital Precinct. And at our space, we run a animation incubation studio. So what that means is that we take self-taught artists and graduates and we upskill them to fill roles needed in the animation industry. So essentially we act as a finishing school for animators. Yeah, that's about it.
Cool, who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Okay.
Hi everyone. My name is Twari. Full name is Horakhanyo Legabe. I'm an animator and creative director at Popeye Studios, handling mostly your layout designing. I do a lot of graphics and the illustration as well for the work that we do there. And I have a background in interior architecture, so it's kind of fitting, for the whole layout design situation. But in a nutshell, that's who I am. That's what I do.
I'll go next. Tracy, do you want to go? Oh, I'll go. All right, cool. So my name is Mrauki Kana. I am a visual developer, an aspiring film director. I worked as a storyboard artist, character design, and basically I'm more kind of like involved in the pre-production space of animation. And I'm currently doing my master's in animation at Gobelin in France. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go. So I'm Tracy Shuki. I am a animation lecturer and head of Department of Gaming and Animation at an institution called SAE Institute, Rosebank. My background is in, I've got a master's in digital arts from WITS, and I have done mostly script writing, content creation, and producing in the live action and animation space as a freelancer.
Oh, what's up, everybody? My name is Timelo Slamlela, and I'm a founding director of Canvas Academy. Canvas Academy is a smart art center that runs a series of digital art and 2D animation programs. We've been doing this for about 6 years. In an essence, it's an informal art center. So we're bringing back the concept of art centers, but now we have reimagined the art centers to look towards animation, gaming, these more futuristic, if you may use that term, careers, rather than just possibly fine arts as what art centers used to focus on. We run these series of digital workshops all around the country, Limpopo, Pretoria, Cape Town, and there's one that in KZN that we're going to be doing as well. So ultimately, we discover talent from high school. We discover talent that is sitting at home, drawing on a piece of paper, not knowing what to do with that skill. We are usually the first point of contact into the industry. What we're trying to do is to lower the barrier to entry into the animation industry using digital arts and just the drawing skill, because there is a space, as we all know, when it comes to production, that raw talent can fit in easily. As for background, Personally, I've been doing animation for over 10 years, I think. I worked on all feature films, that is Adventures in Zambezia, Kumba. And I've also worked on another feature film called Jock, which taught me how not to make movies, but that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, that's pretty much me. And also, we are heavily involved with the animation school, which is a formal education institution that does 3D animation and that focuses on higher education. Yeah.
Cool. Nice to meet everyone. So I think let's start with a hard question. Is the animation industry in Africa, does it have adequate supply of animators? I can take this one.
Okay. So I know if a few months ago, I worked on a project called Bridges. And basically what Bridges did was they were kind of like trying to bridge the gap between the international market and local animators and artists. One of the things that I realized during this process was I think there are quite a few artists locally, but then we kind of don't know about them. It's almost as if like they I don't know, they don't put themselves out there enough for them to be discovered, or sometimes they don't have like enough like they don't have the platform to basically showcase themselves and their work. And so because they don't have all these kind of spaces, it kind of seems as though they are not like we don't have enough artists within our within our area. So I think that they are. We just have not kind of like found them yet. And I think like initiatives like what Tumi is doing was like going to all these different places and trying to find all these different artists who don't have a platform, to actually give them a platform on which they can start from, and to actually I think for people to know that like the industry is actually a thing that can sustain you, and you can actually find a job in, and you can kind of like see yourself grow, and is also really important. But like to answer your question, I think there is adequate, we have an adequate amount of artists. Is just that I feel like a lot of them do not have the platforms, and so we don't know about them, or we don't kind of like see them. But I do think that like so I think in order for us to kind of like bridge that gap, we just have to have like little initiatives where we try and look for these people, and we give them platforms to kind of like start them and grow their skill.
Okay, that's very true. Who wants to answer that one?
I can go.
Okay.
No, you want to go through? You can go. You take it. Ladies
Okay,
first.
sure. Thank you. What I was going to say is I agree with Michal. There is extreme talent, but at the moment, a lot of that talent is not trained, and it is not aware of what career opportunities are available to them. So although we've got a lot of very strong artists, they haven't been given the opportunity, one, to even explore what fields are available to them, or to find the right people. Because unfortunately, as talented as one can be, a lot of this industry has to do with good connections. And the only way to address that, I think, is by creating a stronger community for people to reach out to each other and find the right people that they need to be with. So there is a lot of talent. Unfortunately, a lot of it is untapped, but hopefully we can address that and find the right people to meet each other.
Yeah, I just want to pivot on what you guys have said already. I agree 100% that there's an overabundance. I'd like to argue that there's an overabundance of them, but the frame that they're coming from is I can draw, right? They don't even know what really animation is, what the industry is about, and so forth. And I think back to schooling days. There's always that one kid who knows how to draw, in the same way that there's always that one cocky kid in the class. There's the girl who really likes herself, the it girl, and there are all kinds of characters that are presented within a classroom. And there's always that one person who say, you know, a project comes up, everyone in the class knows, go to such and such a person, you know, to go and draw for you. You understand? But the frame that they're coming from really is, I just have an ability to draw, you know, and they just don't know how does that ability not fit into a career and so forth. So yes, you know, given the fact that there's very little information that has been made accessible to people, you know, in these areas, and I'd like to even argue mostly in your underprivileged township schools and so forth. There's a lot of them. You know, I for one am familiar with a handful of young boys from the township of Kutsong in particular, who have an ability, who've come together and they're like, okay, we have this ability to draw and whatnot, and they're constantly thinking of ways to use this thing. You know, for one, I know they start getting into things like fabric paint, you know, on people's jackets and stuff like that, and selling all of those items of clothing. And those are the ideas that they have, you know, but not knowing how much further can I push this thing, where do I fit in, and so forth. Again, it goes unnoticed, untapped, you know. So yes, definitely there's a whole lot of young people out there who have an ability to draw. There's an overabundance, but it's not just providing them with a means and a way for them to get into the industry and start practicing, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just add on to what Tori was saying right now? Is that basically it's like, I think of a lot of artists that I know of right now, and I feel like because of the environments in which they were kind of like raised in, it kind of allows them to kind of like explore more things. So I think of myself and I'm like, I would have probably been one of those artists who is like part of like the untapped group. If my dad had decided to just kind of like let me grow up at my grandmother's village, you know, back when I was growing up, because like the only reason I know about all these things is because he moved me from Limpopo to come to Johannesburg. And so in Joburg, there's obviously like, there's so much happening, like you can't ignore it. And so, and I think it would be cool if we had, you know, like I said, man, like the thing that Tumi is doing, like also with Kasi Sketchbook, that is amazing because you get to see a whole lot of people who are really passionate about this thing, but they kind of don't know what to do about it, because most of the time in schools, because of the situation in our country, we kind of try to concentrate a lot on like, you know, like medicine and like, you know, technology and all these other infrastructural, you know, development careers, whereas I think the arts are kind of like not concentrated on, and it all makes sense. Like the situation of our country is that of like we're kind of concentrating on like necessities. We can't do those, and so you can't really, because art is seen like as like a very fun thing you do in your spare time, and so you can't be talking about like drawing cartoons when kids are going hungry, you know. Like you gotta find a job, like go work at Pep or something. So it's like you gotta, yeah, you gotta, there's like so many things, there's like so many problems within, I think, a continent as a whole, because one of the ways that I see this, there's like a lot of artists who that we're not finding but exist, is on Instagram. So on Instagram, I get a whole lot of DMs from like a lot of artists who are like in like Nigeria, you know, like Niger and Mozambique, all of these guys who want to become part of this industry, but because their countries or like their cities and their families, like we do not have a culture necessarily of like embracing art. And I think ever since I got to France, I'm just kind of like seeing how the culture of the artistic movement is something that is embraced so much that it's like, an example I can make is like the same way people on a Saturday would go to like I don't know, the mall or something. People here go to like museums on dates. Like no one in South Africa will take you to an apartheid museum for a date. That's ridiculous. But like here, you know, people really love the fact that like they love like the curation of art and life and culture. And so they do that. And so because like there's this huge culture and appreciation of it, it allows for people to kind of it informs the youth and like whoever the heck is interested in this industry to begin with. So there's like a culture that needs to start, for instance, within our continent, not necessarily just South Africa, but like, yeah, man. My main point here was the culture of art needs to be a thing first before we can, before we can find them and embrace the thing fully. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now here, Tracy, from institutional level, what do you think? Since you're part of the HFD for SAE, am I saying it right? SAEI. Yeah.
I'm going to maybe speak a little bit more about actually from the industry experience that I've had. A lot of times I've heard things like, or I've come across things like that we've got the talent, we've got the artists, but there isn't the projects to actually work on like we don't have enough projects to sustain the industry on an ongoing basis. And I think it's really tough as an artist to then find the work that you can consistently do. And I do know a lot of people who start out in industry and then kind of give up halfway because of that, because it's challenging to consistently have work. I mean, even the bigger studios that have work, they will upscale for a certain project and then they have to downscale again. And then it's kind of, I think that's one of the things that I've come across where projects have been a challenge. But then I've also heard on the other side, studios that or companies that talk about having had to turn away work because they didn't have the capacity or didn't have the work force to be able to handle such big projects. And I think a lot of that then comes down to the industry being for a long time, my understanding is that it's been kind of working in silos, and that I feel that we're getting to a point where there is finally a little bit more collaboration happening between smaller companies as well, and really trying to work on training, trying to work on collaboration. How do we make this work together? But I do feel that that's been a bit of a challenge where we see, projects, really great projects happening, and then there's like kind of like a bit of a dip, and then I think that for me is one of the things that I've observed in the last few years. But I do feel like we're getting to a better point at that point. From an educational perspective, give me a second to think about it. Sorry. I just find I've just had an open day this morning actually, and just the one question I consistently get with every single parent walking through these doors is, what is my child going to do? And that kind of links up, I think, with what Mocha was also saying, the awareness and kind of like the awareness for the students, so for kids interested in this field, and like, oh, this is a thing I can actually do. And usually when they come here, they're like, I didn't know I could do this. And when I found out, I was so excited. They know exactly what they want to do. So I don't think there's a lack at all. And the other thing is then the parents. The parents is the big thing, where just them walking in here is a huge step, and them asking the question of like, what is my child going to do after this? They walk in here, they're like, this child, they're constantly drawing. I don't know what to do with them. I really wanted them to do maths, but they have this passion for this thing. So like, just tell me more about it. And I appreciate the parents coming to the door and actually asking these questions and being open to learning about this field and listening to their kids and kind of learning about that. So yeah, it's quite interesting, and it's almost like reforming to all the generations and telling them like, actually, there is a future in this, and there's so much stuff going on, and it's a really growing field. And they do kind of then understand when you explain it to them, but it's until they actually come here or wherever they go, and for you to have the conversation and really enlighten them a little bit, and they like, oh, okay, actually I feel better now. But we need that conversation to happen, I think, a lot more. But the interest and the passion and the talent is definitely there.
Thank you so much. Tumi, I know you have something to say about this.
I think Okay, the question is, do we have enough animators for the industry, right?
Yes.
I think for as long as we look at the industry in as feature film and short films, the truth is that we don't have enough projects to sustain each and every animator. Let's just even look at the Mets. I mean, the last feature film that was done in South Africa, sponsored by South Africans, was when I was still an animator, and the second one that just came out about 10 years later is Seal Team, which just came out now. So that whole gap between, there wasn't any project. Well, not necessarily there weren't any project. Trigger Fish were doing a lot of projects, but feature film, homegrown feature film like Kumba, this is the second time after Kumba. So if we always think about animation as feature films and as well as short films, we'll always find ourselves just recycling the same artist. The same art director will be on this film and that film and that film. But, and this is a serious caveat on it, is that we must always just try to bring more artists to think about animation, not only as feature film, but animation as animation, moving pictures. And if we think about it that way, there's plenty of work. Almost every second advert that you see on TV has got some kind of animation. But the problem is these young guys, whenever they graduate and whenever they go into school, all that they want to do is just work on these big feature films. And the idea is Disney, the idea is Pixar. But if you think about it that way, then they will just be funneling into this one single hole where only a few and really cream de la cream will make it. Because when you're talking about feature film, you're taking top of the game, you know. But now what happens to the rest? What happens to the guy who's just average? What happens to the guy who's just not really the greatest? Is there going to be work for them? The same way that you would think about any accountant, you know, there's a guy who's probably graduating cum laude in UJ as an accountant, but the other guy who's just going to be maybe cruising at what, 50% or 40%, he might just be a bookkeeper for the local barber shop. At least there's work for him. Do you understand what I'm trying to bring as a comparison here? That now, what do we think? What we should think about as I would say for in terms of animation, there's now infographics, and there is inside infographics. There's also now motion graphics as well. And now those little spots, mind you, they're actually being taken up by guys who are coming from a graphic design perspective, who have never had any animation background, but they've taught themselves animation, and then they started creating these animation studios and they become animators, and then they start earning a living. So for as long as animators separate themselves from those things and saying, oh no, if it's got to do with graphic design, if it's got to do with motion graphics, oh, it's just a cheap little explainer video, that's not what I do, you will always not have enough animators for the industry. But if they then start thinking to themselves that animation, anything that has got moving pictures, timing, spacing, if it's that, I am in. So there's plenty of that. And the last point as well is then the barrier to this entry is 3D and 2D. There's more 3D animation studios in the country than there are with regards to 2D. This is so when we're thinking about 3D animation, then yeah, only those who graduate as 3D animators will make it through. And because 3D animation is very technical, you really need formal training for that. You know, it takes a long time to really master that. But when you're talking just about not even just 2D animation at the level of French animation, but we're talking 2D animation as movement, just literally that movement. Then you start realizing that there is also a big market that can actually be capitalized by more young people who are just experimenting. I mean, we've seen this. Some guys who are self-taught, who are starting to create these animated videos, and they're actually getting clients like NetBank, getting clients like Pep, and they're getting different clients. And these guys are not coming from an animation background. It's just guys who know how to tell stories. But for as long as animators approach this thing with that snobbish attitude of saying, it's just terrible animation. Oh, look at the timing. Well, somebody's going to pick it up who's coming from a film industry or who's coming from a graphic design industry or something. And they're just going to do these animation, and they're just going to get into the industry, and they're going to get paid while doing that. And then we're going to have these despondent animators because why? They all want to work on feature films.
Amazing. So what I'm grasping, I think, from all of this is that the talent is there across the animation industry, but then the challenge is about, I think, redefining what the animation industry looks like for the continent and what should be our outputs, basically. Because I think I always find that to be a big challenge to say, like you mentioned, everyone's wanting to work. There's been like 1 or 2 feature films in the last 20 years that are homegrown in South Africa particularly. So what do you all think? So there's 3 questions that came up now to each individual, to each of you here. So for Genies, what would your solution be to creating an environment or the community that you were talking about? Let's start there.
So something that was actually started in 2019 by our interns. They started something called the Lobo Movement. And this was just an open invitation for people to come on Saturdays. It was the last Saturday of the month to just come and draw. There was no entry fee. There was no, expectations, nothing. And easily within the first few events, we had about 50 people coming out of nowhere and drawing and collaborating and meeting each other. So that got the wheels turning about, how do we meet more people? So I've started and I'm in the process of workshopping something called the SADA community, which is the South African digital arts community. And this is basically a Discord server where we hope that people can come and find, a common place, meet other artists. Again, I think the minute you bring the barrier away, that's at least one benefit of having anonymity online, is that you're less nervous of people, especially now with COVID being a factor. Online is actually better and you can reach more people. So we're trying to find ways to plug in community events that are hosted by institutions. For example, we've got the November numeric animation 48-hour challenge that is coming up in November from the 19th till the 22nd. And we're hoping to funnel people through events like that into the community as well. And then, any person who's enjoying the community, they may know 2 or 3 other friends of theirs who don't, and just bring them on. It's really about having a space for anyone and everyone to take ownership of, do their own thing, and just have a platform that they can talk to each other on.
Okay. No, amazing. And then the next question, before I give everybody a chance to respond, it's for Swarhanyo. Am I saying your name right? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you are Swarhanyo, that's right.
How would you suggest one can provide provide a pipeline for people to get into the industry, and then are there outreach programs for talent transfer?
I think that one is a little bit tricky. Though, I mean, on a practical level, it's really just first and foremost about gathering people. It's really no difference to what Ginny was talking about right now, about having called people to a particular setting, and people show up and they're just there to draw more than anything else. And I think the other thing that needs to be considered, which is very important, is remembering that animation is a medium, right? Animation is a medium, but it is not particularly the main thing. What the main thing is story, right? And the reason why it's important to understand it is because even if you can come with a person who is at least marginally good as far as the quality of work that they produce is concerned, a good story is what makes the movie, the production, whatever, great, right? And the aesthetic is always secondary to that. And I think that's something that's so important for us to always remember, that story fundamentally is the most important thing. Now, we should be pivoting more on stories than we are pivoting on people's ability as far as animating and so forth is concerned. I think that in itself eliminates so much of, I think, this wall that can stand before us, where it feels like, it's difficult, right? Because the work that we want to produce, we want it to look amazing and so forth, but ultimately that's not going to be the thing that guarantees an award. It's not the thing that's going to guarantee that the production is going to be amazing and so forth. So I think for me, the perspective of shifting from animation as a medium to understanding that story ultimately is the goal in all of this, right? So then you can use a person who is marginally good to get onto a production and put stuff out there. Very simple. I think from that should be the vantage point from where we operate as far as the work and so forth is produced. And then when we have that in place, gathering the people no longer becomes difficult, because we are no longer grading people according to the level of skill and ability that they have per se. And we are qualifying them based on that. We are qualifying them on, okay, I have an ability to do this. It's not amazing. It's not the best there is out there, but we can work with it, right? That's the first thing. I think the second thing then is putting together that situation that Jeannie was speaking about now, where you call people together very simply, let them draw, give them a criteria of some sort, say put together, such and such a thing, just to, I guess, grade them and see, okay, as far as skill level, where do people fall under? Would this person be good in a setting where maybe say rotoscoping, right? How would the rotoscoping look, on this person? How well would he do? Then you have people who do not particularly need to rotoscope and who are a little bit more knowledgeable about that, even though they haven't learned, in a formal setting, but they have somewhat of a better sense than someone who has to start at a low level of, merely just rotoscoping and literally tracing and so forth. And I guess then grading those people accordingly, seeing then according to story being the main currency, which person would fit better into which category, right? And then making them each learn within those different departments. And as they get better, then elevating them from one medium to the next, on that level. I think on a very practical, simple level, that's how it should be done, as that I think will eliminate, this war, that I think many people who are out there are feeling that, okay, I have this ability, but I do not know what to do with it. I don't know where to take it and so forth. I think that's just my own layman's thinking as to how it should be done, really.
Yeah. Okay, no, thank you so much for that response. I assume Tumelo and Tracy might have a response to that. I'm judging based on reactions.
Look, I think personally, building a community, and I think for me, look, we've been doing a couple of things, initiatives, trying to get people to start drawing. We started a program some years ago called Kasi Sketchbook Club. You'll be surprised how a young person doesn't really have a sketchbook. And a sketchbook, if you say you're a musician and you want to do music, the first thing that your parents will probably get you some kind of makeshift musical instrument, even if one of those, you remember those oil can type ones, something that can help you understand. So start there. For us is get every young person to have a sketchbook. Every program that we run, we make sure that we give sketchbooks. A sketchbook is the first place that you're going to document all your ideas. Brasipo, firefighter by day and by night is this criminal, that's where you can be able to illustrate those kind of ideas down there. And then the second thing is, look, I really wish we could get to this point where it should feel like Nollywood, I don't know about you guys. I think for me, it felt like Nollywood, there was a truck that just stopped somewhere and they just released all cameras and booms and just said, go make films, and now what Nollywood and what that industry has become now, you see this crazy, amazing music videos, but that evolved from, from people just starting to tinker with this technique and this thing and trying to tell stories. And eventually then they started creating this beautiful production. It's a natural thing, So where we are and what we are trying to achieve is to just get every young person, have a tablet, have a laptop, and have a free software and just produce, man. Tell the story that you want to tell. I think that's where it is at. And we've seen that as well in the music industry. There's now this new music called Mapiano, and ask all of those kids, what school did you study at to refine your, they'll tell, no, I was tinkering with Fruity Loops on my computer, and then I started hearing music and started. If we are to get animation in Africa to be at that level, it has to be at a level where the it's accessible to everyone. And then that's when institutions can come in and start refining that talent for high-end production, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, if you're going to give this technology to young people, they're just going to produce whatever that they can produce. But this is when institutions like SAAE comes in, and animation school now starting to refine for a high-end production level, like feature films, short films, and mostly, obviously, most of the work that we're getting is international work. And for those international clients, because truth of the matter is, when that international client comes in, there's this certain quality that there is no one who's going to have time to be training anyone inside the studio to be getting to that quality. They expect you to know. Truth be told, they expect you to know, hit the ground running and go, But if we are to then initiate the culture of just storytelling, going back to what one of the panelists said, that if we use animation as just a medium and take this medium and give it to most young people and say, produce whatever that you want to produce, just do it, and it starts with sketchbooks, get into that habit. I teach a lot of kids how to draw. There is that culture of not wanting to share what you are drawing in South Africa. It's just not there. It feels like you're an artist, you're at home and you're this special little child and everybody knows you to be the artist in the house, but nobody else knows about that. And no one can give you feedback and critique. So once we get into that habit of just getting more young people drawing, and I mean, it's I think for me, that's just the beginning of it. Everything else will be able to layer on as according to the needs of the industry.
Okay, no, definitely. If you get more sketchbooks out there. And Tracy, from an institutional perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
Maybe just adding on to what Dumi said and what I'm kind of perceiving also again with students walking in here, I do feel that there is, and it also links with what Mochal said earlier, a certain kind of disadvantage, I guess, because a lot of students walk in here and they ask me, do I need to have had visual arts at school? Now, the problem is most students have not had visual arts at school. It's not something that is encouraged. It's like you have to do like sciences and, like more academic subjects to be able to qualify for certain universities or whatever. So already we are starting at a level where we're like, no, you don't have to have that. We are teaching you the fundamentals. So we know that we have to start with the fundamentals. Yes, some might have drawn here and there, and we get some who come in really strong because they've been doing this as a passion, for a while. But generally, we can't have the expectation when they come into a formal institution like ours that they come in here, they have super computer literacy skills, super visual literacy skills, and they just kind of can go and start at an advanced level. We have to start from the basics. And I think in that way, it links up with a lot of what has been said, that we are already as an industry in South Africa, I think we have to start at a later stage where other countries maybe have already done all of that before, and you actually come to a formal institution like this, and you are now, going to a more advanced level. So we kind of have to really start from almost like from scratch. I mean, most of the students, they've drawn, but they don't really know like what is frame by frame animation, what is cutout animation. We really have to teach them from the ground up. And I think in that way, obviously, after 3 years, for example, with us, you get to a certain level, but you probably, if you compete with other countries, you wouldn't be at the same level that you could be at if you had this kind of background already, if you had been given a sketchbook and training by Jimmy, for example, in advance already. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that we have to take into consideration.
Can I just
Yeah.
Can I just quickly add on to what Tracy just said? And I think that's something that maybe we haven't touched on as well on that topic is the art in high school as a medium. Art in high school is dying in high school, literally. I mean, it's only Momohao who ended up being in a art school where the teachers are still passionate about what they're doing. But for as long as our government thinks of art as this hobby and not necessarily thinking about art as the core of everything. I mean, everybody that is in this watching this, everything that is around us has been designed somewhere, somehow, and this is the culture that is incubated as well in French countries, that art is at the core of pretty much everything, whether you're going to call it design or do you know what I mean? So the key thing is, as well as if we're going to be building these communities post high school, trying to find that talent that wants to shine, it's also important to build these communities from a young age, to allow young people to start getting into this thing. Because like Tracy said, these guys are competing with somebody who's been drawing since they were 6, you know, and by the time they finish at a higher education, these people have had hours and hours and hours and days of practice. So, and when you find a young person, unfortunately, and that's what they have to deal with. When you're in an institution, you have to absorb what you get out of matric, you know. But if we then can go a couple of years back and say, hey, look, let's teach you this language from an early age. Let's teach you what form is, just the basic thing, form, you know. So yeah, I think we also need to have conversations with government about how do they perceive art and what do they think of art in high school.
Okay, well, thank you. Ginny, hold on for Ginny.
Okay, cool.
I was just going to say that is one of the biggest heartbreaks I've seen is, so in 2019, we had a program where we had underprivileged kids come through the studio, and just for a day, they got to storyboard, they got to see what goes into animation. And the biggest misconception, I think, is that kids are under this impression that you have to be talented in order to be good at art. And talent is not necessarily real. Talent is just being practiced. So if you can introduce people, and something I always try to do as well, if you're an artist trying to approach a child who wants to get into the art, they'll get discouraged if they see how good people around them are. So it's also really important, I feel, that we start having a conversation with the younger generation to show where our starting point is. And I feel that could help build up the enthusiasm that one needs to get back into it. You know, I've known people that were amazing at art, and then they get discouraged by parents saying that that's not a career. They stop drawing for 2 or 3 years, and by then they've killed their pace, and then they have to spend all the time catching up. So for me, a huge thing is the younger we can get to people, the better. I feel like it will really, really boost our industry, our community, the well-being of artists, and just the overall quality we put out.
Okay, thank you for that. How, before you respond, there's a question for you which you respond in your response. Basically, it says, it's from Jade. How would you encourage one to get into animation and build a belief that they can achieve it? So in your response, you can respond to that also.
Okay, cool. Just repeat that again. How do I?
How would you encourage one to get into animation and build a belief that they can achieve it?
Oh no.
You can't hear me.
I cannot hear you. Well, now I can hear you. When you said the question, that's when you, yeah.
How would you? You can't hear?
One more time. No, repeat again.
Okay. How would you encourage one to get into animation and build a belief that they can achieve it?
Let's see. All right, cool. So I'm just going to answer that first. How you can get into animation. I mean, I guess the fact that you have that question kind of, I don't know. It says to me that there's like an interest. First of all, I think in order for you to get into anything, you kind of have to be interested in it. Do as much research as possible. Try and find, I mean, it's very hard to find, I can imagine. Like, I can imagine if I'm in like grade 10 in like KZN and I don't know if there's anything such as animation industry, it's like, I think, yeah, sometimes it's a matter of like research and also just kind of like creating a portfolio of like practicing how to draw like basic things. It's like anatomy, you know, environments, perspective, and stuff like that. So just kind of like teaching yourself the basics of art to start off with. And then in terms of animation, if you're talking about film and if you're trying to get into that space, you'd have to probably look at people who are already within that industry and try to imitate. I remember when I was, so what we used to do with my friends is we used to look at like Marvel comics and DC, and we used to try and emulate and draw like them. So not necessarily to copy them, but to kind of like get onto that level, because there's like a level of drawing that you kind of need to get to in order for you to be kind of like taken in to a group setting of like, people working on a project within the industry. So first of all, yeah, do research, practice as much as possible, and try to imitate or emulate people that you look up to within the industry. And also, we live in like an internet age, and so this thing is like created for us to use it. The more you kind of get your work out there, the more you kind of expose yourself to the different communities within the space, whether it be like international or local. You will definitely find people within the animation space that that exist on Facebook, Instagram, and all these other social media platforms. So I think do all of that, but then also try to post as much as possible, because like Tumi said, that's where you kind of get your feedback, especially if you can't get feedback from like your family members and whatever. You need to kind of like put yourself out there so that people of the world can see what you're doing. And so try and do that, and also emulate people that you look up to. That's how I think you'd kind of start, to get your foot in there. And then in terms of, I think Tumi said something about like, trying to get the government to jump on board with this. I personally think that, guys, the South African government is not going to do anything. Like I operate from the standpoint of like the government is never going to help you with this, right? So I think by kind of how I think of the government, this would be crazy if like our government was one of those where you get like you get taken out for talking crazy about them. But basically, I'm like I don't think of the government as a place to start, because I feel like when I start to rely on them for things, I'm taking the power away from myself to do something about it, right? And so I think we kind of have to I think we have to operate this in the same way that you would kind of operate like a private entity or like a private business. You have to like go out of your way and to do certain things and make sure that certain things are done. And so like certain initiatives, it's going to take a long time. Just like Nollywood, it will take a long time. I saw a film last week from like it was actually like a Nollywood film called Swallow, and the quality of like image and sound has improved so much that you can see it's not Nollywood, but like the level of like the acting, just like the production is amazing. And so all of that had to start from the point where these people were doing like amateur things that look weird and sound crazy, but then like that had to happen in order for it to get to this level. And so I think with us right now is that we also have to kind of operate from the point where we have to go out of our way to make sure that like we provide certain spaces or like platforms for different types of artists. So I kind of think that we kind of have to do it ourselves. I don't think, in as much as like it would be great if the government could help, but like we know they just have their own problems to start off with, to be worrying about artists. And like realistically speaking, I know like we're important and all, but like if you had to think about like funding artists or funding doctors, I don't think we're winning that fight. So that was the first point. And then like in terms of the talent, I think that for now, what's going to happen is that like talent in terms of what Jeannie said. She said some people think that you have to be kind of talented to get into the space, and I do agree with Jeannie in terms of like, of course you have to practice, and also like the people who seem talented, so to speak, are the ones who've been just doing it for longer. It's just a matter of time and practice. That's kind of what it is. And so I think that being where we are right now within the industry, the people who are going to be kind of like going forward faster into the industry are going to be the ones who are obviously like the best artists, right? And then I'm thinking that obviously when that happens, when these people start to become bigger and like take on more projects, that they will then get like other artists who are following behind them. So I think it's only like the nature of our industry right now is that of like we need to rely on the best to kind of create like a better platform to pull other people up so that everybody can come up. But like right now, I feel like if you're like a, I don't want to say mediocre, but it's like not mediocre, but like it's like your level of skill is not where it needs to be in order for you to compete like internationally, then of course you're always going to be at the bottom. Like you will always be at the bottom until you can like break that barrier. And I think one of the ways in which you can, you know, improve your level of skill is like just challenging yourself to do better. Because some people get so stuck into just like doing the same thing over and over again because that's like their comfortable spot and they don't like want to explore other parts. And so sometimes you might be good at like 3D or 2D, but you're just so stuck up on like drawing on paper. Or but also I guess it then goes back to the whole thing of like, do you even have a drawing tablet to begin with? Do you have like, do you know about anything called like, do you even know about Maya and Blender and all these different softwares? So, but I think in terms of what's going to happen right now is I think the best artists are going to make it first, and then I am hoping, and I'm kind of like trying to I'm hoping that obviously whoever makes it first will create a situation where, you know, other people can come up with them and kind of like be within the same space, especially within like the whole like the context of Africa as a whole, not just like South Africa. So yeah, that's yeah.
Okay, Jeannie had her hand up. I think it was.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to that. So coming back to the original question was, you know, how do you get into animation? And being in animation and being in the industry, there's one thing that we all seem to forget is that we have been in here long enough to understand the language behind the industry. We know what layout is. We know what visual development is, but these are, you know, inside words. You know, every industry has its own set of language, and someone who is outside might not be privy to that. So I would say the first thing that you'd want to learn if you want to get into animation is first understand what's available to you. And how do we figure this out? The easiest thing I would say is one of the advantages of our industry is we like to show credits. So watch a film, figure out what do you like about this film, watch the credits, you'll see someone who does compositing. What is compositing? Let me Google that and find out. Someone who does lighting, someone who is a wardrobe designer, someone who is, you know, a texturer, or someone who is a 2D artist or an in-betweener. These are all terms that someone might not necessarily know, but might end up having an affinity towards. So I would say if you really want to get into animation, first watch a lot of animation, understand what it is that you like, and make a point of learning the language is very important. Understand what it is you want to do. Because 90% of the people we take into our internship, you ask, what do you want to do? And character design is the most common thing out there. It's the most well-known thing out there. So all of them say character designers. They want to be character designers. But a lot of them we find are really, really good at making assets, or actually really, really, really good at layouts. And they don't know that because they don't know that that's a word. You don't know what you don't know. So you have to make a point of trying to explore these things. And once you find out what this thing is, it's as simple as going to YouTube and finding layout tutorial. And in that, they'll start bringing up even more language that you can then go and do research into, like what is atmospheric lighting, for example. And these are all things you can start adding to your personal piggy bank of things you want to learn. And that I find really, really will set you off on the right track.
Okay. So sorry, thank you, Jeannie. So sorry, yeah, his hand is up. Yeah.
Okay, just to get clarity again on the question being, how do you get someone interested in the industry, right?
Yeah, it is around how do you get someone, some along those lines, yeah.
All right, cool. So my initial thinking and mindset behind, you know, everything that I assume, you know, I will say from this point onwards in regards to the question and the subject of this discussion. I think we should always start from the premise of teaching people or people who have an ability to draw, right? Who are not particularly animators as yet or who want to be animators, but teaching them more about the industry than the profession of it. There's a difference there, I think, a major one. When you teach about the industry, you have a more vast, again, going back to the point that Jeannie was making now about, there's so many things that you can do within the industry itself, beyond just the animating process, whether it be in 3D or 2D or whatever. But the reason why that's so important is because that's also the very thing that informs technological development, and keeping up with the time and the developments of technology within the industry of animation, right? So there's a thing that I call the Ostrich Eagle Vantage point, right? An ostrich is a big bird, right? It's a big bird that runs really well and it's very fast, right? And it's strong in that particular regard. But the thing about an ostrich not being able to fly, it can only see what is in front of it, right? So people are often looking at, okay, as a profession, this is how much money I'm going to make as an animator, right? Which is another point that I want to get into after I clarify this little bit here. But the person is always looking at what is in front of me, and they do not really see what is the vast expanse of the industry itself, which is what you have as an eagle. You see the beginning and the end of the entire thing. And there's so much more perspective, so much more clarity, and also a clarity of opportunities that are available to you, right? And I think that's something that is very, very important as a distinction that needs to be made, even in educational institutions, so that people are not going into this thing merely thinking about, okay, as an animator, I'm going to make X amount of money. This is how far I can go, and that's it, right? Because this is all they're seeing. But when you teach people about the industry as a whole, you can see so much more, right? About, okay, I have an ability in this particular area, and this is how I'm going to fit in better than if I was just doing this other thing on this other side, right? So the second point I wanted to get into, just like from a basic level, I think, and this is something that every artist at some stage in our lives who have ever considered to engage in the arts in one form or another, is on a monetary level, is this thing feasible? All right. There are many people out there who have decided to leave the arts because they think that they cannot make money out of it. Right. And I realize to a large extent, it's not only a thing of misinformation, but because we do not have an eye for opportunity. Right. I mean, I look in our South African context right now in the animation industry in South Africa. The opportunity is crazy, is immense, right? It is immense, but people are not seeing that. They're just seeing the profession of animation, and they're not seeing the opportunities that are available, given the fact that it's just at this point, it's still a very small demographic of people who are even animators, right? Who are engaging in this industry right now. There's still so much more to be done in our South African context alone, right? And given the fact that on a global scale, there aren't that many animators, I am not even sure if we can even count them in the millions, probably in the hundreds of thousands, perhaps, right? But that tells us that there is immense opportunity, and given the fact that the global market share is what is in the 4 billions, if not a little bit more at this stage, right? Or no, that's 1% in actual fact. It's about 40 billions, 400 billions or something, right? I'm mixing up my numbers a little bit right now. But the point being that opportunity, right, should be the thing that we're driving forward more than anything else, and not so much the profession, right? There are people out there who are lawyers today. There are people out there, who are doctors, people who are all kinds of professions whereby, they are supposed to be getting more money, right? Which they are, but inside there's a dying artist, who never ventured into that field purely because on a monetary level, it just didn't seem very feasible. So I think it's important to educate people on the industry the industry of animation, not the profession necessarily, where you're sitting in an office and there's this work that needs to be done. You're sitting down, drawing, boom, you're done. You get your paycheck and that's that, right? But people need to now see, okay, beyond just that, what else is it that's available? And that's when we start having the discussions then about the technological developments that are happening and so forth. And without going too far, that is also very important because we are never then caught by surprise as far as technological developments and so forth are concerned, right? Because what we now are doing, you think again of the analogy of the eagle, right? You can see what other people do not see. You can see what's coming that other people are not seeing, right? And that is essentially what makes you competent in the industry and opens up a world of opportunity and even on a monetary level, open doors for you, I think.
No, thank you so much.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Can I ask a question to Swara? So, sorry, like for instance, right now, I'm just thinking about the fact that, you know, people who are watching this are hopefully people who are interested in the animation industry and want to join it.
Right.
And you said something about like mentioning the opportunities that you have, which is like one of the most enticing things that you can give someone is like, oh, what is it that I can do within the space? What opportunities would you say there are? Like specifically, if someone had to be like, so what kind of opportunities are there? Like, what can I actually do or like be a part of?
I think that's something which is very relative. The point that I think is more important to emphasize is the fact that it's still very early. And given the fact that it is still very early as an industry within the context of South Africa, for example, there is a lot of opportunity. So there's a lot you could possibly find yourself fitting in to do, right? And on a monetary level, get quite a lot of bang, so to speak, on that. So I am not putting emphasis so much on all of the opportunities that are there as far as like what are some of the other professions within the industry are concerned, which yes, you know, that is still valid. But I think the point that I'm trying to emphasize is the fact that because it is still early, right? You know, how they talk about, you know, the early bird gets the first worm kind of situation, right? Yeah. As opposed to later on, when like, you know, it's now saturated, and that now limits people in their access and what it is that they can do in the industry. So I think the point that I'm trying to drive mostly there is that because it is early, the people who realize, okay, what's at hand first, and who are, you know, bold enough to go and jump towards that thing are going to get the proverbial first worm. You get my point?
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, cool. I hear you.
Tracy, and
I think, look, I would probably ask like questions to everyone here about exactly what because like I think what we do sometimes is because obviously we are within this industry, we know the jargon, blah, blah, blah. To someone who does not know exactly what we're talking about, they don't know what the heck this is. So it's like, if I were to make a practical example about like, you know, literally you can go on Facebook and you go to Kasi Sketchbook, type that stuff in and see where the announcements will be, like see announcements about where they are going to be within the next month or two, whatever. That's like a practical way in which like to kind of like get yourself in contact with the community. We talk about like the budgets and like, you know, the things that happen, you know, behind the scenes, like the industry. I think just like so for instance, if I'm a kid and I have to explain to my dad about like the animation industry, like I have to do like my own research about that stuff. And so it would be cool if we kind of like provided things to actually go to actually, you know, like give good reasons as to why I want to be within the space. Because a lot of us are kind of restricted by obviously like the culture around us, our parents and whatever. And so a lot of people need to prove themselves. Unless of course you are one of the brave ones who were like, F the parents and I'm just going to do this thing no matter what anyone thinks. Because there are some people who do that, but like for most people, you know, that's so I just want us to kind of like be a little bit specific about what you can do because if I know nothing about this industry, it's like, what on earth do I do? Where do I go? If on the internet, for instance, that kind of thing. So that like this whole video must be, so
Yeah.
someone must take something out of it, like practically, like what is it that I can do right now today to actually make sure that I'm a part of this, like,
Yeah.
you know?
I hear you. I was going to ask that. Like, so what should people learn when they want to get into the industry? I think I was going to ask that to Tracy and Tumelo, in terms of, because they are practically out there, and Jeannie also practically out there teaching people on the ground in terms of how to get into the industry. Well, Tracy, I think, is a bit more formalized, but Tumelo, I know, is a bit more on the ground and stuff. So, to answer Mukhao's question on the practicalities, how do you practically give information and education that is relevant for someone to be able to access the industry and enter into it and practice and monetize and grow into it? I see Tumelo's hands up already anyway. So I'll start with you, Tumelo.
So look, as a first, whoever asked the question, you're in the right place, my brother. You ask, or my sister, you are in the right platform. You're asking questions. You're doing the right things. You are following up. What is Fak'ugesi? What is Animation Cape Town Festival? Whatever, you are doing the right things. You're following the crumbs. The truth is, I'll answer your questions in 3 parts. The truth is, for as long as we're always going to give you this, when we came on this earth, we never knew what the hell living is. We came here as babies and we were forced to live, and we made it work. Do you know what I mean? So for as long as we're going to give you a super picture of what the animation industry, my brother, I will depress you right now. If I were to tell you how much you're going to be earning, where you're probably going to be working, and I'm going to give you a whole picture, you're most likely not to be interested. Where you are is you are starting at a point where you are passionate about wanting to do something, follow the crumbs, follow the social media posts. People are always writing in. And what Gina also said, if you watch a movie, watch the credits and just type in, what is this person doing? What is that person doing? And the third thing as well, don't just only watch the movies. You must always think, okay, cool. If I don't end up being a feature film, what else can I be doing? I just saw an advert and they were blowing up some car insurance. Oh, cool. Let me find out who did that car insurance animation. It looked very crude and whatever, but yeah, let me have a look at what they do and how can I be able to do what they do. So practically, you are following the crumbs. You are watching these YouTube videos. You are checking people's artwork and where did they study from, or what did they start doing? Then the second part as well is that, look, we must also remember that from an institutional point of view, and I'll also speak about the animation school as well, is that there are career expos every single year. SAE, the animation school, Boston, and all these institutions, they're going to these places and they say, guys, there's this thing that we do, and there's this animation. So there are always career expos, right? So people are exposed to this animation thing that we're doing. And then the third part about it is that you spoke something about how do we educate people about this? How do we get young people to understand, to get the information that they need to follow this industry? I mean, it's a very, very young industry from our side of things, and the capital from us, it's valued at 500 million. So it's not that big of an industry in South Africa. But if we were to look at it from that point of view, this is when I'm bringing in a government once again, Mohau, in this conversation, because you attended an educational system that is supported by a government, which basically the government said that there's going to be this school called National School of the Arts, and this school is going to focus on the arts. There is the buy-in. Yeah. At that point, whoever said that they saw the value of bringing in these young guys who are not really technically inclined, who are not scientists, who are not good at science and maths, and they said, we're going to try to build an environment for them to actually cultivate their skills. So from an educational point of view as well, Dylan, is that I'm then saying that we then have to always encourage this from a government, from a basic education point of view, to say, this is what artists are doing, this is what art is all about, and this is what artists could actually be, not only just only for fun arts. So that's why I'm advocating for that, because once you begin to, I got into animation when I was like, 14. You know, by the time I made a career choice, I knew what I was getting myself into. And nobody had to tell me. I knew, because I engaged with this thing, with this medium, at a time where the stakes were very low. I'm in high school, I'm playing around, I'm going from studio to studio, I'm hopping around, I'm seeing people sleep overnight. So I kind of like started making my mind as to, do I really want to commit to this thing? By the time I finished matric, I had made up my mind. My dad even knew that. So the stakes were high at the time. I mean, imagine here you are, you have to make a career choice and you're out of high school. Or some people right now, maybe they might be asking of wanting to leave their current careers that they're in. The stakes are still high. So when you are young, when you are very young, you can experiment with all kinds of careers. I experimented with fashion design, with all these other things. And I realized that, look, this is not what I want to do. This is what I want to do now. So from an information point of view, I'm advocating getting this information at a very early age to most young people so that they can make informed decisions, so that when things are not working out or things are working out, they know that, look, I've been engaging with this thing. I really know what I'm getting myself into. They watch TV every single day, watching these cartoons. Perhaps even on those segments, we should have guys coming in and actually explaining what this is. It's very difficult now to answer, to explain to somebody who now wants to make a career change because they've heard about this thing called animation, and they need to decide how much money they're going to make and how long do they need to actually practice and get better at it. So how do they get into this thing? I think I answered at that first part of the question of my talk, my answer to you. And the second part was basically trying to zone in on this education terminology that you brought in, education and information part that you brought in there, Dillian.
No, thank you. Tracy and then Swari. Yeah.
I think for me, I think the question was around how to be informed about information about animation, and then also how to get into industry, right? Okay.
Yes.
So I think for me, there's two things that I kind of want to elaborate on. Firstly, for us as a formal institution, there's always kind of 2 points that are important. One is kind of getting the students into the school, but then the next thing is, so how do we find them? How do we reach out to them? But then the other thing is, okay, now they get the education, but then how do we place them into industry? And for me personally, that's always been a big thing, because I had a lot of feedback that I got from industry while I was still in industry and not in the education sector, where it was like the schools are doing their own thing and it's not really related to industry. And I think one of my personal missions being here now is kind of trying to bridge that gap, because I feel like that's another problem, that the educational institutions, they have a set curriculum and a certain way of working, a set way of working or that they have to follow, but it has to always stay relevant to industry. And I think also the South African industry works a particular way and has certain needs. And obviously we can't accommodate everything of that, but I do think that there is such an important point there that we need to always stay relevant and we need to stay in touch with industry. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is reach out to industry, set up meetings, partnerships, listening to kind of what they do, and then understanding what is the landscape of our industry, especially here in Joburg. So that's kind of like the one thing for me as well. Like once we have them, how do we make sure that they understand the industry and they can put a face to it and they kind of know where to go to even just to start out? Because I find the biggest thing is always starting out. Once you've set foot in the industry in some form or shape, I feel like that's when that if that has happened, that entry point, then you will be able to continue onwards. But that's always the hardest point I find. So that's a very important thing for me as well, just to look at, once we do have them and they're interested and they want to do this thing, then how do they get into industry? The other point that I just wanted to mention, and we've talked a lot about high schools and like how do we inform students, and I'm just kind of throwing that in because it's something that I've been working on for years as kind of on the side as a passion project. But I've worked on a preschool animation. We're working on a preschool animation that deals with art and African art, and actually teaching preschoolers about African art, because the way we grow up with a lot of Western art. So like everyone will know Picasso, everyone will know like the big names from other countries, but knowing about your own heritage and knowing about, you know, what are the artists here, like an Esther Mahlangu, or it's a bad example, but you know, like she's a great example, but there's a lot of other artists out there that we are not familiar with. And a lot of my experience has been actually just learning about the amazing artists that are coming out of South Africa or Africa as a continent, and relating that back to children. So they grow up with this as something they are familiar with, and have local artists that they can look up to, be it contemporary, be it, you know, classical kind of artists from, you know, decades ago. But yeah, so that's, I feel like as much as we need to look at high school, and that obviously that's the point where we really want to educate and want to make sure that they are familiar with or they know about animation, or that art can be a career. Sometimes it's even thinking further back and looking at, you know, even there it's missing. Oftentimes we see art in maybe like preschools because it's like, oh, it's a kid's thing, you know, like you do art, and then afterwards it's like, okay, now let's get into academics. But how do we sustain this and really build a culture around an understanding of art, and African art in particular, I would say, and then continue on from until like high school, and then really already building that in there. So yeah, that's just something that I wanted to throw in there as well.
Okay, well, thank you. In the interest of time, we can do it like last comments and then wrap it. Yeah. So the comments you make now will be the last 2 minutes. I see you already have raised your hand.
Yeah, if you're out in Pretoria, there's still 4 slots available. We are running a program for 2 weeks where we're introducing literally traditional artists to digital arts, animation, and pretty much what we're talking about. So that's where another point of start that you can start from.
Okay, thank you. Who wants to go next? Last comments.
I can go next.
Yeah.
I think what I would say is for everyone out there maybe watching, whether it be right now or at a later stage, be honest to your desire. I think be honest to your desire to get into the industry. Be honest to your artistic desire. Just be honest about it, and then follow through with doing the research, doing the homework, finding out, you know, on every level, you know, as much as you possibly can, what it is that you're getting yourself into, and make a decision. As Tumi said, this is exactly what Tumi was saying initially, but make that decision knowing exactly, okay, this industry is all about this. And I guess pivot yourself in such a way that you are best fitting what you know you would probably flourish or thrive in within that industry. And I think when you do that, you really position yourself to succeed in a very, very great way, as opposed to someone else who is just going in, with ignorance, about what they're really getting themselves into. So I think that would really just be my exhortation to anyone out there who is considering the industry of animation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jeannie, you want to go next?
I would just say for anyone getting into the industry, also understand that being able to draw is not your passport into animation. Animation is incredibly collaborative, and there's 1,000,001 ways you can do things. For example, someone who studied architecture may not realize that they could be very good at set design, for stop motions, for 3D. It's not all about art. There are so many fields that you can explore and go into. Really, first, just understand what it is you like about animation, look into it, and then try different avenues and experiment. It's collaborative. We need everyone's input to make a good film.
Thank you. Now, you want to go next?
I mean, look, there's nothing really like new that I can add on to this apart from what everybody just said right now. I agree with what everyone has said. Obviously, yes, do explore what you want to do. Be true to yourself about, like, obviously how you want to be involved in this. But I guess in order for you to know how you want to be involved is to do the research. Practice as much as possible I also think this, I mean, like, I get that, like, you know, in every industry, there's like the person who's, I don't know, like a cum laude type, and then there's the one who passes like normally. Most of the time, this is just like the harsh truth of everything, everywhere. Like the people who make it to the top are the ones who are the best at whatever it is that they do. So try to basically just improve on your skill. Your level of skill has to be something that is I find of importance, you know, and it might not be like just like the visual side of things. Maybe you are a storyteller type, and so try to find whatever you're good at and try to basically maximize and basically hone that skill. That's basically my parting words from this. But yeah, also one last question: where this whole thing, like, it's recorded, right? And so you're able to watch it again, right? Okay, cool. All right, cool.
Yeah, on
Cool,
YouTube.
No problem. Sweet.
All right.
Nice.
Tracy?
Yeah, I think from my side, just what I would like to add is that it is a growing industry, but it's still fairly intimate in South Africa. So don't be scared to reach out to people in industry such as ourselves, and to ask the questions. I feel that oftentimes we feel like we need to struggle, you know, on our own. And I do think that industry generally, people in industry are very helpful, very open to helping and wanting to help grow the industry. So if you are, I don't know, if you find an artist, if you see a studio that you find is maybe close by, or even if they're not, I mean, we are in a digital, you know, in the digital age. Reach out to people, send an email, a message, a phone call, whatever it might be. And I do think that you will find that people will be very helpful to assist you in whatever way, as a mentor, as a kind of, there's a contact, you know, look at this, look at that. So yeah, that's just
Thank you.
2 cents.
Thank you. Timberly, you want to add, or you're fine with your last point? Okay. All right. No, thank you so much. Thank you everybody watching. Thank you for the questions. This was an insightful conversation. If I ever wanted to enter into the animation industry and learn about it, I think this is a good starting point, and the 5 people that are here are good connections to have within the landscape, basically. So thank you to GFC and all other partners that are helping this festival happen, and thank you to everybody attending it. Basically what's left, like 7 days more left in the festival. Later on today we have one more presentation on visualization and animation, and then one more discussion on women in animation with Nickelodeon. Later on, a panel discussion on women in animation. So thank you so much everybody, and thank you to everybody here for taking the time, your Saturday, and yeah, wherever you are in the world. So thank you very much. Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yes.